Just like programming languages allows you to create variables, CSS also allows you to create variables. And in this video, I'll be simplifying how variables work in CSS. Variables are labels that you create and assign values to them. And wherever you want to use these values, you can use such variables. And when the program is run, these variables would be replaced by the values. In CSS, you can create variables for values such as font sizes, colors, background positioning, width, height, literally every property that exists in CSS. This allows you to easily share values for different elements that you want to style. And like I said in this video, I'll be showing you how CSS variables work by showing you how to declare variables, also how to use them, how variable scoping works, and also how to reassign new values to variables while writing your code. So let's jump straight to it. I'll be using this simple HTML project to show you how CSS variables work. This is the code here. This is the HTML file. I have the body tag, a h1, a div, a p tag, and an image tag. And here in the CSS, the only thing I've done is to apply a width and height for the image tag, but the body tag has no styles, which you can see like this. Variables in CSS are declared just the way you declare properties in CSS. The properties in CSS, you have, for example, the border, and then you have some values. So this is a similar approach for CSS variables. The only difference is that before the variable name, you're going to have double hyphen like this, and then you can have any variable name of your choice. So I can call a variable like variable this, just for an example, and then here you pass the value of that variable. You can pass values like font size, like this, 5 pixels. You can pass yellow like this. You can pass even a long value like 1 pixels solid red like this. You can pass as many valid CSS values as possible. So here, let me just pass a color and I'll call this red. Now, how do you use this variable? Let's say we want to use that variable for this h1 and for this p tag. Then here we can come here and say h1 comma p tag, so we can apply styles on both of them, and we can say color, and then we're going to use this variable. Now, how do we use this variable? This is where we use the var function, which is variable. Here in this var function, then we pass the variable name, which is hyphen variable hyphen this, like this. If I come back to the UI and I refresh, you can see the h1 now has a color of red and the p tag has a color of red. If I come up here and I change the variable to green and I come back here and I refresh, you can see they are now green. Also, let's say I have another variable called border size, and this is like 5 pixels. And then for this h1 and p, let's say I want to apply a border that is going to be solid and is going to be red. Now for the border size here, I can pass the same variable function like this, and I can say border size. If I come here and I refresh, you can see the border size applies to the h1 and the p. So this var border size is going to be replaced with 5 pixels, and then we have solid and red. And even here I can still use the var function again like this and say variable this. So this is going to be 5 pixels solid, and this is going to be variable this, which is green. So that's 5 pixels solid green. You can see the way it applies. You can also have something like default display, and here we can say flex. Let's say we want to style the div tag. So here in this div tag, we can say display, and then we have var, and then we have default display like this. This is going to be display, and then this is going to be replaced with flex here. Again, with variables, if I come here and I change this to blue, and I come here and I change this to 20 pixels, for all the elements that are using that variable, they are going to be replaced with a new value, and you can see there are so many thick things happening here. And because this div is a flex, you can now see that the p tag and the image are in a row, just like you have with default flex styles. And the next thing I want to explain with variables is scope. Just like other programming languages, variables have scopes in which they can be accessed. The scope of a variable depends on the location where it is declared. In CSS, you can declare global scope variables using the root selector. So here we have the root selector, and then here you can declare global variables. So here I can move all of this from this place to this place like this. So now that it's in the root selector, you know that the div have access to all of this, the image has access to all of this, h1p, everything in the HTML is going to have access to these variables. If I come here and I refresh, you can see they still have access. If I change this to pink and I come back here and I refresh, you can see the pink. For local scope variables in CSS, this depends on the elements that you declare the variable. So if I come here, let me move this variable this to this body tag here, and let me call this another color like violet. Is there anything like violet? Oh yes, there is. If I come here and I refresh, you can see that this body tag, we declare this variable here. This variable can only be accessed by the body tag and all the descendants of the body tag. So here in the HTML, this would have access to that variable, this would have access, this would have access, this would have access. Every descendant of this body tag will have access. But let's say I come here and I put this variable inside of this div. Here in the HTML, you can see that this h1 tag is not a descendant of the div. The only descendants of the div here are the p tag and the image tag, which means these are the only elements that would have access to this variable this that we have declared in the div tag. Although here in the CSS, in the h1, we apply a color with the variable this variable, but you can see that the h1 is still black. That is because it doesn't have access to the variable this variable. But the p tag, since the p tag, which is here, is inside the div tag, and here in the p tag we also apply a color of this and a border of this, you can see that here the p tag has access to the color and it also has access to the border. Now if I change the border here to black like this, and I come back here, you can see that the h1 has access to the border size variable because we declared this on a global scope, and this is 20 pixels. So the h1 has this 20 pixels solid black, which you can see here, but the h1 doesn't have the variable this color because it is not inside the scope of that variable. If I come back here and I move this to the body, since the body has the h1, the div and everything, if I come here and I refresh, you can see this is how it is. The h1 now has access to this color and the border. Also, you can overwrite variables just the way you overwrite other properties in CSS. So you can reassign different values to variables at different points in your CSS. So for this body, we have this variable this, which says violet. I can come to this div and overwrite the variable by basically declaring it again. So I have variable this, and then I can specify this to green. So here I have overwritten this variable by reassigning green, whereas before it was violet. You can see that this paragraph now has the new value, which is green for the variable, but the h1 is still violet. Why is that so? Because here the h1 is not a descendant of the div. So the h1 still uses the value for the variable that was declared on the body, which you can see is this violet. But because this p tag is in this div, and in this div we reassigned a new value to that variable, which is green, then on the p tag this is going to have a different color, which is green here, while the h1 remains violet. So this is how variables work in CSS. They allow you to create labels for different values, and then you can access those labels in every element that has access to them. Like I said, you can declare variables of different types. You can declare 20 pixels, you can declare 20 rem like this, you can declare blue, you can even declare something like repeat one and then one fr, just as you have in grids. You can declare something like align center, which you have in flex. You can declare as many supported values as you have in CSS. All you have to do is pass the double hyphens and then the variable name, and by using the var function and the variable name, CSS is going to replace the variable with the value that you have declared. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, also subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos I'll be creating, and also check out my CSS Simplified playlist where I simplify different concepts in CSS.